all CEOs have a shelf life, and it doesn't endear you to anybody if you're taking an extraordinary amount of money out of the business. I think basically what Elon needs to do is concentrate on Tesla, concentrating on bringing Tesla out of this hole, investing cash in product evolution, and getting to vehicles that are affordable to a greater proportion of people, and maybe less time spent in Washington.
Hello and welcome to the Tech Report. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're joined by Dr. Andy Palmer, former head of Aston Martin and widely known as the Godfather of the electric vehicle for his work on the Nissan Leaf. Dr. Palmer, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Well, Dr. Palmer, Tesla, the electric vehicle company, of course, quite famous around the world and owned by Elon Musk, have reported a 60% drop in sales in July. It's the latest in a series of not great figures for Elon Musk's electric car company. Where do you think it's all gone so wrong?
There's not a single singular answer to that question. It's a compounding effect that I think. So, first of all, you're absolutely right, and I don't think you can just look at July numbers and draw a conclusion for July numbers, but you can certainly see a year-on-year drift. Tesla's roughly 7% behind its 2024 volumes after 7 months, whilst at the same time UK new car demand is up 2.4%. So there is a problem. There's no denying there's a problem. And I think that you have to look at a whole series of different things, some more serious than others, but all having some impact on the trajectory of Tesla going forward. The obvious one to get out of the way, and it's the most difficult to define, is the characteristics of Elon Musk, the founder himself. He can be considered, I guess, somewhat Marmite, and if one looks to the UK audience, which of course is what we're talking around here, you can see that basically 4 out of 5 people basically disapprove of him. You can look at the net ratings, and they're down there with in fact President Trump, and the two, even though they've fallen out, their reputations are intertwined. And when you have that kind of toxic reputation, it has an impact on the buying public because people might not want to be associated with that. There is, of course, those people that are hugely supportive of him and his position, and of course they will buy. So there is a little bit of balancing, but there's no doubt that as of today, the UK public are not fans of Elon Musk, and that undoubtedly has an effect. And it may well be a warning to all automotive CEOs to stay out of politics. But it's not everything. I think we also have to look at product. At the end of the day, car companies sell products. Historically, the Tesla product has been amazing. They've rolled out a whole number of vehicles, but you have to remember that they haven't recently launched any new vehicles. They've done derivatives and facelifts, sometimes fairly significant facelifts, but the sort of rules of my industry say that typically a platform has around a 10 to 14 year life, and the upper body gets changed twice. The Tesla products are outside of that norm, and you can only go so far by doing constant facelifts and constant updates. You have to change the platform at some moment, and I would say that some part of the Tesla offer is getting a little bit tired. Pricing pressure. Teslas will not qualify for the UK rebooting grants for electric cars. They're basically priced above the £35,000 threshold. We've seen in July whilst the EV market has grown, it hasn't grown at quite the same rate as it has historically. So we can conclude from that that consumers are waiting, and they won't be waiting for a Tesla because we know that the Teslas won't qualify because they're above that £35,000 threshold, and there doesn't seem to be any sight of the low cost Tesla that has been promised. So, what does that mean? That means it's opening the UK market up to Chinese competition, and Chinese competition is really, really stepping in. You saw that BYD registered over 3,000 cars in July. That's quadruple what they did last time, and three times the Tesla tally. So, really, BYD is really stepping into that area. And you look at their value narrative, irrespective of whether we apply tariffs or not. BYD Dolphin starts below £28,000. The MG4 below, well, around £27,000. So they're comfortably in that qualification area. Whether the Chinese vehicles qualify or not, they're still very, very good value for money. Um, you're also seeing some new players, Amoda, uh, Jacko. These are names that you might not know, right? Zika, Neo. These didn't exist a year ago, but they're now selling very well. Amoda and Jacko sold 19,000 vehicles in the first 7 months, so they're certainly stepping into that space. And it's Tesla no longer has the monopoly in this EV area. So I think, basically, if you're trying to simplify the argument or what's going wrong with Tesla, it's not a simple argument, but you've got this compounding effect of the reputation of the founder, the impact of the model cycle, and that Tesla vehicles are, let's say, not that young anymore, and that basically the Chinese manufacturers are stepping in to fill a gap, particularly a value gap, and maybe exploiting that grant aid that may or may not apply to the Chinese. Certainly will apply to the European manufacturers. Sorry to not give you a very simple answer, but it's a complex question.
No, no, I think our audience will appreciate the depth there. And you spoke about Elon Musk's foray into politics and his wider image among the general public, especially here in the UK, but it's a global image. We are in an era where a lot of CEOs and billionaires, for that matter, do have something of a more significant public image. Um, is there a warning in this for car manufacturers not to have that public image because of how wide their vehicles are distributed, or has Elon Musk just slightly gone about this the wrong way from a sort of PR perspective?
I think if you commentate on your own politics, I guess that's your right to do. But I think particularly where Musk got it wrong was commentating on other countries' politics. That certainly drove a wedge between him and the UK public and the German public as just examples. So the sort of common sense within the industry is, generally speaking, not to get involved in politics. You sometimes, as a CEO of a car company, sometimes it's unavoidable. But generally speaking, you try not to alienate either side. You try to drive a line which is fairly neutral. I remember, for example, when I was CEO of Aston Martin in the middle of Brexit, everybody wanted to know automakers' opinion around Brexit, and you can cast out, I think, the benefits and the detriments of the proposal, but I don't think it is right that you draw a conclusion on one side or the other.
And you mentioned that the threat of cheaper Chinese electric vehicles available on the market. Other European and American manufacturers have seen a slowdown recently, as you say. Chinese manufacturers are starting to do a bit better. But is there anything about the Chinese market that is a particular threat to Tesla, or have they just found themselves at the back of the pack here?
Well, first of all, Chinese cars, are they good news or bad news? I guess from a consumer point of view, that you have availability of very, very good quality, very technically stacked cars at relatively affordable prices. I get that great news for the consumer. It's obviously not good news for the European industry if we're unable to compete. And you tackle that in one of two ways. You either get fit and you get competitive, or you put up tariff barriers that you then use that time basically to catch up. I'm a advocate of the former, not the latter. My point of view is that tariffs are no good for anybody. They just pass price on to the consumer, and generally speaking, you don't have the competitive drive to catch up if you're behind a tariff barrier. So I'm a great believer in the capitalist approach to let's compete. But there's no doubt that these Chinese cars, that the Chinese have spent the last 15, 20 years perfecting these cars. And the area where they're particularly strong is, I would say, in two areas. One is obviously the battery capability and the range that they're able to give on the battery. But the other one, not often talked about, is the software stack. If you think about the way that you jump into a Chinese car and it's just intuitive, it behaves like an iPad. They've done that better than, let's say, by comparison, VW, that had all sorts of problems trying to develop software to their automotive standard and have forgotten that basically consumer needs for software is something different. So, basically what you're getting with Chinese cars, you're not getting a dud. You're getting very high quality vehicles at very affordable prices, and therefore they represent to the European industry and the American industry the same kind of threat that the Japanese represented in the 80s.
And of course, Tesla have benefited in some ways. You mentioned from US policy. You mentioned the tariffs there. In a way, it's a tariff that the US has almost completely banned Chinese vehicles and electric vehicles. That was, of course, under the previous administration. Musk seems to have benefited a bit less from the Trump administration in the end, despite his previous closeness. We've seen significant cuts to electric vehicle grants as a result of Trump's policies. How much does Tesla and electric vehicles in general need that kind of grants and government support at the part it is in production?
Depends on speed of change. Um, I have to believe in technology, and when as an engineer, when you develop a technology, you can't put it back into Pandora's box after you've discovered it. Same with all technology. Electric vehicles, they're good for emissions and particulates, and they're good for CO2. But they're also, if you get down to the basic science, they're extraordinarily thermodynamically efficient. So the useful energy on an internal combustion engine is about 30%, more or less. So of the energy that you're consuming, only about 30% of it gets used in terms of driving the car. The rest is wasted in heat. On an electric car, that same comparison is circa 90%. So the science says that electric cars are ultimately the way to go. Now, there are things that hold that back. The most obvious one, of course, is range, and therefore energy density, the amount of energy that you can stuff into the battery to give yourself a reasonable range. And that's something that the evolution of the engineering will resolve over time. So you'll get to a position where the electric car is simply better in all aspects than the internal combustion car. And there might be other technologies that come along that will compete with that, like synthetic fuels. But just taking today's situation, the electric car will win out because it's simply a better engineering proposition. Now, what speeds that up is, for example, whether you believe in climate change. If you believe in climate change, then you'll believe that there's an emergency that says you've got to get to clean energy vehicles as quickly as possible. If you believe in childhood asthma being caused by particulates from exhaust smoke, then you'll want to get electric cars introduced into cities as quickly as possible. So it depends on that political will, and it's that political will that will speed up or slow down the introduction of electric cars. If we look to America with the current Trump administration, it does seem odd that he and Elon had this pact, because very clearly Trump is a cynic when it comes to climate change, whereas historically Musk has been an advocate for that change. So they were strange bedfellows in that sense. But the Trump administration is undoubtedly slowing down the climate change response, and therefore EV adoption. On the other hand, what you can see in China is a wholesale adoption of EVs, and they're using this time basically to peak out on their CO2 burn, in other words, energy created from coal and oil. And they're basically not only trying to lead the world in electric cars, but they're also leading the world in things like solar panels. So they're using the time that the West is giving them basically to transition over to new technologies and be ready for a position where, from their point of view, there is a there is a climate crisis, and governments will need to get behind the change because of the impact that that climate change has, and they will be in a winning position for all of that technology. And if we follow that, Europe's somewhere in the middle. If we allow that to happen, then we're terribly exposed. Our industries are terribly exposed to Chinese technologies and our ability to compete with essentially no other solutions. So I do think it's a problem. That's why I don't agree with the tariffs that have been applied. I don't agree with the anti-climate change narrative that we're hearing. I think electric cars are more than just about addressing climate change, but they're also down to addressing our industry needs and the assumption that we want a car industry looking forward.
And so, is there a route out of this slump for Tesla then? Is recovery possible, and where might we look for that recovery?
Tesla was always going to see a decline in market share. It had an initial leadership position. It was pretty much the only electric car manufacturer out there for a while, and there are more competitors. So naturally, whilst the volume could grow, the market share will undoubtedly shrink as they find their natural position in the marketplace. The question is, how much does that market share shrink? Honestly speaking, if they don't address the product life cycles, if they don't come with lower cost vehicles, if they don't make cars that consumers outside of the US want, and I think there of the Cybertruck, there is no market pretty much for a Cybertruck outside of the US. Then they won't maintain a very strong position, and their market share will reduce, and they might become the Nokia of the car industry, if I could use that analogy. But if they address their product issues, they address their marketing issues. Maybe if Elon concentrates on what he's good at, maybe there's a way out of it. It won't be the same level of market share, but it can be a growth in volume.
And the debate over Elon Musk's pay package is one that goes back a long time now, before some of his foray into politics alongside Donald Trump. But the just yesterday we've heard that Elon Musk is going to be awarded shares worth around $29 billion in what Tesla says is an incentive for Elon to remain at Tesla. Is that likely to inspire confidence in the company when there's a lot of questions going around about where Elon's priorities lie?
It's always a toxic point, isn't it, talking about CEOs' salaries, because it's hard to see from a layman's point of view what they do to deserve this. Elon is not the same as a CEO of a Volkswagen or Ford. Those guys are employees of the company, where Elon is arguably the founder of Tesla. In fact, as you know, he wasn't the original founder, but he became a founder by acquisition. Um, whether 29 billion is an extraordinary number, and whether he's worth, or anybody is worth that, is obviously questionable. What you can see from the history of the car industry is that people that have been on extraordinary salaries, and I'm thinking of a couple of my old bosses fall into this category, that at some point of time they come to the end of their tenure, and basically someone will come to the conclusion that it's not worth that level of money. All CEOs have a shelf life, and it doesn't endear you to anybody if you're taking an extraordinary amount of money out of the business. I think basically what Elon needs to do is concentrate on Tesla, concentrating on bringing Tesla out of this hole, investing cash in product evolution, and getting to vehicles that are affordable to a greater proportion of people, and maybe less time spent in Washington.
Well, Dr. Andy Palmer, former head of Aston Martin and widely known as the godfather of the electric vehicle, thank you very much for joining us today on the Tech Report.
My pleasure.